When I visited some of those in Europe, you know, I look around and I'm thinking, well, that's British, that's British. And then, you know, part of a lovely collection went out to the States. So I started to sort of collect stuff in earnest, purely to just keep it here in the UK. Here we have the sort of the rich and famous, really. We've got items here for Wellington, Nelson, Churchill. This piece of cloth at the top here, that was a piece of cloth that was draped over Nelson's remains when he returned from Trafalgar. And when his body returned here on the shores, the sailors ripped it up and kept pieces as a memento. Anything to do with Nelson seems to sort of be really collectible. And, you know, back in this period, there was a hell of a commercialism around death, you know, jugs and that. A good example of this is if you look at Princess Charlotte's death. Now, she was the only child of George IV. Had she not died in childbirth, she would have come to the throne and we would have never have had Queen Victoria. And she was a Diana of the day. Very, very popular person, a very tragic death. And a lot of items were created around her death, whether it be jugs and mourning programs. It was very commercial. You imagine then coming on 100 years and Diana's death. You know, it would have been wrong to have been made out a commercial thing. So all we ever saw was like a beanie baby and a little coin, and that's all you would find.
And no commemorative plates?
No, none of the big commemorative plates,
That's
nothing
a
like
British
that.
thing, isn't it?
Well,
like
yeah,
this
yeah.
one here.
Yeah. Oh, with Victoria, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that was really commercial. This brooch here, Queen Victoria actually commissioned for the death of Albert for all of her staff within the royal household. Now, the one on the right there was what you would buy on the streets. So, quite basic, and that's a paper insert. And what's remarkable is how that, you expect the one in the box to sort of stand the test of time. Well made by the Queen's jeweller. It was going to be a collectible from day one. That out on the streets, can you imagine how many hands that's gone through and how many drawers that sat in till it appeared here? And yet, it's remained intact.
It's in great shape.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. It's a bit like in here, you know, when Edward VII died, there was postcards struck of him there laying, reposed in bed.
Oh, with a dead, yeah.
Yep, a dead
Yes,
king.
he was, yeah.
Could you imagine us doing that when our late Queen had passed away? Can you imagine a postcard being struck? You know, it was unimaginable.
That would be equal to desecration.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
look at all what was done for Queen Victoria, but when our Queen died, nothing, absolutely nothing.
Why is that?
It would have been, I suppose, just seemed to be wrong, morally wrong, you know, just in poor taste to make her death commercial. Sign of the times. That's the way it was. This is mainly around deaths and disasters. When I say deaths and disasters, wars, conflicts and disasters. So that's on the First War. And, you know, when we look at how things have changed, when we looked at, you know, like with royalty, when I first came into business, say 50 odd years ago, we had these memorial cards, which would go in your wallet. So when we was arranging a funeral, I used to have to organise these on every funeral. You don't see them now, it's just died out. But then if you went back a little time before me, they actually told a story as well, like this one here, in loving memory of Albert Hatswell, a 12-year-old who lost his life stopping a runaway horse on Easter Monday in the Holloway Road. You know, you just wouldn't produce something like that.
You have the same thing on the old gravestones.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
this.
they tell a story. This is a great one, a spoof one of the time for Adolf Hitler. In repulsive memory of Adolf Hitler, the mad dog of Europe. And on the left-hand side, invariably, of a memorial card, you would have the grave details. On the one they did for Hitler, it just says, "Beneath this sod lies another." And again, these were all told a story. The poor victims who lost their lives in hostile aircraft, hostile aircraft, I should say. That was in 1917. This one was a Zeppelin raid back in 1915.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like 5 persons at once.
Yeah. Well, you imagine it goes back.
Family died.
Yeah, you imagine. This goes back to my father when he was here, you know, in this area during the last war. You know, literally whole families. We've still got some records, although we lost a lot of our early records, because our old office, the one in this picture here, this old office, if you was to see the larger photograph of this, it's a wasteland all around. Everywhere got flattened by bombing, except for our old office. The top was all blown out, but the actual little shop remained.
So this bricked area was non-existent?
No, that was all just, as I say, it was a glorified pigeon loft by the end of its day. These are quite interesting because we was talking about, you know, classes earlier on. And if you think back, even as far as medieval times, the poor used to get a very, very poor funeral. And the upper echelons of society, very lavish and all that. And it got to a stage where the wealthy and the rich and the famous wanted less, and those at the bottom end of society wanted more. A bit like life in general. So you could always tell with the upper echelons, they were, back in medieval times, they would be run by the College of Arms, part of the royal household. And if you was a duke, a baron or an earl, you had a prescribed funeral. You couldn't have more and you couldn't have less. So that was it. And you could tell a noble funeral by the coats of arms. You could tell their lineage. You could look at a funeral and by counting the amount of poor people behind and the banners and the bannerolls, you would know their status. By the time you got round to my grandfather's days, these coats of arms, you know, people wanted something more. Now, a body's always laid at home, and they would lay in the front parlour. So you imagine you'd go to these terraced houses, working class areas of London in the time, the body would lay in the front parlour. If you spent a lot of money on a solid oak coffin with solid brass, you know, grandfather would lay on an extra special pall, and you would get a piece of carpet as well for the body to lay on. And he would rent out these coats of arms, which are quite a generic. And if you look in the front of that shop there, you will see one of these coats of arms displayed. So he would rent them out. So in your last days, you could just look a little bit wealthier than you perhaps really were. Yeah, you've gone up a stage. A posh funeral. Got very little continental stuff. I've tried to keep everything, but this actually is a reproduction. It was a frieze. It's an image of a frieze that went round the city of Basel back in the day. And these would have been paintings around the wall, city wall, you know, like 8-foot characters. It's Memento Mori. It's a reminder of our mortality. In as much, it doesn't matter how poor you were, your status generally, right up until the rich and famous, and clerics and that. When death called, you went. You left everything behind you.
And there's Adam and Eve even here.
Yeah, no one was spared.
Nothing like a good old Dance Macabre.
No. They did it so well in Europe.